Hello again. I've got another video for you today. I'm going to start off another section called Story Time. If you're watching some of these vehicle ones and wondering where these piles of junk came from, I will tell you in story time. So I'll put a link somewhere in this video. I don't know how to do that yet, so I'm going to have to figure it out. But maybe like up here, or over there, or at the end of the video. Probably at the end of the video. So go ahead, enjoy this. If you do like it, subscribe, like, all that good stuff, so it helps me out with YouTube. Here's another gem I haven't touched in several years. So this one I really have not tried to start in a long time. I can see that tires are sunk in. One tire's up on concrete, so the whole thing is flexed in a weird way. Last time I drove this, I remember blowing the front drive shaft out and bringing it back here and parking it. And I don't really remember when that was. It's been a long time though. So I'll show you a couple more things because I really have not played with this thing, so the fuel system might be a real mess. It may have been sitting here long enough that it did not have ethanol fuel in it. I kind of doubt that though. Ethanol's been around a long time. Ethanol really destroys things as far as the fuel system is concerned. You can see there in the corner my helper dog is kind of sniffing things out, but he'll probably lay down and you won't see him again. So I'll get this thing set up and we'll go from there. Actually, you know what? I'll just bring this around. I can show you a couple things about it because I do remember those. Battery's wired up and sitting in the bed, so I've got to have some bolts. Once upon a time I had a slightly better fuel system in here, but as of right now, marine tank and the vents open, so that's probably full of water. So I'll get this thing started up. Oh, there's an ORV tag from 08, so that's only 12 years ago. See, ORV 2008. So 12 years ago this thing was legal to go play off-road. I think I've driven it since then. In fact, I'm almost positive I have. I have to have had it out since then. But it's been a while. So we'll get this thing, see if we can get it to fire up. I bet it will. I bet this one won't be too much of an issue either. Alright, we've got the same story as the other truck. I've got a no longer tagged but still an Edelbrock carburetor. One of the things I do really like about these is it seems like when you leave them sit for long periods of time, which this one has, they tend to just drain their fuel out and do not have issues as far as jets clogging up and things like that some of your other carburetors do. I'm not going to say that never happens, but it's been my experience that they're pretty good about just letting their fuel go and not letting it create issues within the carburetor. Same deal, I already filled the carburetor because we did that in the last one. One slight difference, I have the fuel line off this fuel pump into a plastic jug that's probably going to go shooting out of there, but I want to try to collect some of the stuff that comes through this fuel system before it hits the motor. So when it starts, it should do that pretty quick. Speaking of the motor, again, we should, there we go, pull the dipstick. This oil actually looks pretty good, and it's right on full, so we're good there. This truck has a manual transmission, so I'm not really that worried about fluid in it right at the moment. Same thing with the cooling system, because we're not really going to run it long enough for that to matter. So the fact that it has oil, I've already hooked up the other battery. I've hooked up, that used to go to the carburetor apparently. I've hooked up the battery, and I took that boat tank off, and instead of running that, I've just dumped the line directly into that can that I brought with me. So we're going to fire this thing off. One thing I did notice, the accelerator pump squirters in the carburetor do not look very strong. So I think if this does light off, it may not run very well off of that. The float bowl should be full though, so it should run for a couple minutes. Alright, that was probably out of frame for this camera, but just like I thought, the fuel, that container I had sitting there did come off. It did catch some. It's not very good looking fluid. I do have a filter right next to the end, so it should trap most of the junk. But I like to try to keep that from going directly into the carburetor and clogging it up on the first startup. So, I'm going to hook this fuel line up now, give it maybe just another little shot of gas, although it seems like it's probably alright. Now I'm actually going to care about this coolant level. So this actually did fire up and run pretty reasonable. I can't really get an angle on it, but I can see from here that there is a bolt flat out missing from the header collector, so it's going to sound terrible. But if we open up the radiator, I can see coolant right about an inch from the top. And that'll be fine, because that's where they kind of naturally equalize to if they don't have a burp tank on them. Which this one does, but we're still just going to call it a day. Now, one of the things I'm going to do here, this engine's been sitting for a long time. That means that oil is not where it needs to be. So, when I started it last time, I watched the oil pressure gauge. It is working. As soon as this thing starts, I'm going to bring it up to RPM and let it throw oil up at the camshaft, because it hasn't really had that in a while. Kind of like break-in process on a flat tappet, only a little less involved. They should be broke in. Hopefully it's not rusted up and junk. So here we go. Alright, so this does sound pretty terrible, but I think that part of that is the actual exhaust itself. Another thing we're going to check on this one again is the brake pedal, and it actually feels pretty good. So this probably has brakes. Clutch feels like it works. The clutch probably works. I'm not really sure what else I'm going to do with this, but I will drive it forward a little bit back and forth here. So we'll pause this again and I'll come back to that. Here we are where you probably can't hear me. If you can, we've got a nice steady idle. I'm going to try to put this thing into gear and see how she does. Or what? Well, I would say the front end is locked up. The rear end seems to be moving. Also, part of the reason why this thing sounds like a dying tractor is it has one header hooked up and one not. So, being that I do not have four-wheel drive, the drive shaft is still in there. I think we're at the same place here. This one would probably be easier to get out. But are the tires themselves froze in, or will they not turn?